my name's Shanshan. I do art on shanshan.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review Pet Semetary. So Pet Semetary is this story by Stephen King. This is the second time they bring it back. Kind of like they buried the first film and then it reincarnated, brought a second film, right? Yeah, so a doctor and his family, they're living in Boston, a really hectic city life. They decide to move to the countryside to get away from it all, and so the mom can work, be a stay-at-home mom, take care of the kids. The dad has better work-life balance between the working hours because he was working like dead shift at the ER. So, dead shift is kind of the unholy hours in a way. So they buy this property and it's way out in Ludlow, Maine. So obviously where Stephen King lives, all the stories are from Maine. And they buy this property. It turns out it has this huge land connected to it. And also there's so you see these kids wandering around with the dog, and then the parents have to explain to the daughter, oh, what is that? And he's like, oh, they're burying their pet. And he's like, oh, why do the pets die early? And why do people die? And all this stuff. It kind of uncovers a little bit of the discrepancy between the doctor, the father, and the mother. So the doctor he's based in science, so he's more of an atheist belief. He doesn't believe there's any afterlife, nothing. And the mother has some religious beliefs. She thinks there's a heaven. So they have this discrepancy of how to explain death to their daughter. The mom's not comfortable explaining death at all to the daughter, so you don't know why, but it comes out. So then their cat, what's the cat's name? Anyway, the cat, I can't remember. So this cat gets run over by the truck because there's this huge road by their house where the trucks are like 50, 55, which is ironic because Stephen King, I don't know, a couple years back, he was actually walking one of these roads and actually got hit by a car, so he became part of his own novel in a way. Not that you want to wish anyone that. I mean, he's a great writer, but yeah, that's the dangers of living next to a highway. It's not really ideal for kid living. It's better if you're kind of a residential neighborhood. The cars maybe drive only 30. Still can kill kids, but it's not the same as a truck driving 50 miles an hour, right? Same thing happened to Stephen King. I guess we can bury Stephen King in the cemetery there. So they find these kids and they're burying their pets and they're wearing masks, and it's all this really strange thing. And then they discovered this neighbor next door, Judd, and he's this retired guy, and his wife has passed, and he's by himself and kind of this lonely guy. And the daughter runs into him in the pet cemetery, and she's like, oh, what's this? And he's like, oh, this is, the pet cemetery, da, da. And then she comes back, hey, Dad, there's a pet cemetery. What is that? And they're like, there's a pet cemetery. And so the family gets together with Judd. They have a kind of a dinner. And so then when the cat dies, they're like, Judd's like, hey, let's go bury your cat. And he's like, all right, we'll do it tonight. The kids go off to Halloween and they come back. Yeah, so they go to bury the cat, but instead of burying the pet cemetery, the guy's like, hey, you wanted to bring the cat back, right? He's like, your daughter's really attached. He's like, yeah, she's really attached. I just don't know how to explain it to her, right? He's like, I got a solution for it. So they climb over this huge hedgerow that's surrounding the pet cemetery. And unbeknownst, the Indians that were originally there had built that to protect people from going further into the property. And so they climb over this huge wood, which is like all crazy looking and obviously looking, very deadly. Why don't they just walk around? It would have been the simplest way, but it looks cooler to climb over, right? You're passing some kind of boundary. So they go through a swamp and then they climb these stairs. It's almost like they're going to 300, right? So it's kind of funny. So at the very top of this hill, they have to dig through this hard dirt. He's like, you got to bury your cat yourself. You got to do it yourself. It's your cat. He's like, whatever. So he digs the barrier, puts the cat, and then they say, now you got to put those stones on top. So they put the stones on top. He's like, okay, whatever. And so the next day the cat comes back, right? But the cat's not really the same. It's like all greasy and nasty. And the cat's gone from this really nice cat to this kind of vicious cat. So the father approaches Jen. He's like, what'd you do to my cat, dude? This is crazy. He's unnatural now. He's like, well, I buried my dog and he came back and he wasn't the same, but he was always kind of a nasty dog, so he just came back a little more nastier, right? So they're like, oh, I thought your cat would be different because it's a really nice cat. He's like, no, this isn't right. And then the cat actually attacks his son, right? I mean, it scratches the daughter and then it goes and attacks his son. And so he's really worried about this cat, and they're like, he talks to the old guy, and the old guy's like, well, my dad had to shoot my dog afterwards. But the second time, he's like, okay, I'll take him to the vet, he's still in the science-based world. But he doesn't take him to the pet. What he does is he has some medicine, he gives it to the cat passes out, puts it in the cage, and he kicks it way out in the country and drops off the cat, right? He's like, oh, my problem's solved, right? The cat's in the middle of nowhere, he's going to just be in the forest somewhere, he's possessed, but whatever, it's like 50 miles from the house. So the next day, they have this nice party for the girl's birthday, and it's number 9. in the cake, but obviously reverse 9 is 6. That day they have kind of pinned the tail on the donkey with the dad, so the dad's spinned around in a circle and then the kids disperse into the to hide in places. One of the kids his son goes hides right next to the highway, right? But he's still in the safe area, but close to the highway. And then the daughter, she's like hiding in the woods, and then she looks out onto the road and she sees like something way down, just kind of slowly coming down the high road. Turns out it's her cat, right? And she's like, oh, my cat. And she runs towards the cat, right? And as she's running towards the cat, the dad wakes up and he comes like, where's our kids? Where's our kids? He's like, oh my God, Gage is by the highway. So he runs really quick. And this truck's just coming along, right? And they're like 50, 60 miles an hour. This guy's texting on his phone, which is very typical nowadays, which is super dangerous. As a truck, you have more accidents, obviously, but mostly kids are known for it, but also adults, unfortunately. And so the truck's coming down, and the kid's like right there. And dad just scoops it up the last second, right? Which is different than the book. In the book, the kid doesn't make it. So it's kind of a nice twist for fans of the book to be like, what? You just changed the whole story, right? And so the truck runs on the daughter instead. So the family's distraught. They bury the daughter. And then the mom's like, I got to get out of here. I got to go back to my parents' house. Because she needs to grieve alone. And, the house is just creeping her out, right? So she goes back. And then you get this story of this unresolved trauma that she went through. Apparently, when she was younger, she had an older sister. But this older sister had a severe spine condition. So she looked like some crazy creature from a horror film, which this is a horror film, right? And she had to feed her, and it was like she was just terrorized by this sister because her sister kind of hated her because she had a nice normal body and she didn't. So she sends the food up this dumb waiter that goes up and down in this old house that their parents have, and it gets stuck or whatever, and then the sister crawls out of bed and gets her food, but then falls down the dumb waiter and dies, right? So she actually kind of kills her sister. So this is a really nice backstory. And, this she just had nightmares about this. She's like, oh, I gotta go find my husband. I'm freaking out. And of course, when she goes back and there's a huge traffic jam. But in the meantime, the husband starts drinking with Judd, and then he puts some stuff in Judd's drink. So the Judd passes out, won't stop him from taking his daughter to the pet cemetery, right? So he takes his daughter to the pet cemetery, and then she comes back, and he's like, oh, you came back. And then he gives her a bath, and, but it's crazy because she has like this kind of lazy eye. It's so bizarre looking. I mean, they did a really good CGI effects there. I don't know, because it's just like, you can't open an eye, but one eye's only like this, like totally cross-eyed. So something's up with the daughter. The daughter's in cahoots with the cat now. The wife calls Judd up, and he's like, I can't reach my husband. I don't know what's going on. She's freaking out in this traffic jam, right? And Judd's like, oh, I passed out. I don't know what happened. Let me go talk to him. She goes and knocks on the door and asks the husband, and the husband's like, no, everything's fine. He's just closes the door, boom. He's like, I'm gonna take care of my daughter, see what to do, right? The guy's like, okay, that's strange. So he walks back to the house, and he looks back at the house, and he sees the daughter in the window, and he's like, oh my God. So he immediately rushes in, and he has this old pistol. As he loads it up, he's ready. And then it kind of, goes from there. I'm not gonna tell you more. That's enough of the story. But yeah, it has a really good end. It basically goes where you expect it to go for these kind of horror films. But again, a little bit of a twist in that they switch Gage and the daughter Elle for the killing. So as far as the analysis goes, the only thing I didn't like is the very beginning. They flash forward to the end of the movie and then bring it to the beginning. It's like, why are you going to show the end of the film at the beginning? It's kind of like, it's just cheap version of foreshadowing. I mean, there's plenty of really good ways you could have foreshadowed, and they had a lot of elements in there that early in the story, this kid dies in a car wreck, so that there might be a car wreck in the future. I don't know, they could have just done little subtle things along and have a build up. I just didn't like that scene at all. Maybe it was in the book, but in the book that would you would forget. I think they could have just foreshadowed a little less obviously, because in visual it is very obvious and it sticks in your mind more. I really like these two backstories they had of this kid that gets run over, and the deranged, deformed sister of the mother. Really connects to why she doesn't want to talk about death, unresolved trauma, why she's religious, because she's really paranoid, and her sister had kind of haunted her in a way. At the same time, you also have the symbolism of the doctor. He worked the dead shift, so that's kind of like unholy hours. It's like normally when you would sleep. So he's always worked these kind of unnatural hours, so he's kind of unnatural himself. And so it's kind of a connection with Frankenstein in a way, I would say, especially when you see the daughters like stitched up in the back like Frankenstein. So yeah, it has that really nice element. After the doctor brings back his daughter, he's realized he's gone too far, right? But now it's too late. It has really great trauma with the mother and this trauma of the deformed sister. I really like that backstory because you didn't see that coming. Really twisted. The relation I had with the film, it was really kind of hit me hard in the aspect that there's a fire in the scene where they burn one house down. And when I was a kid, I almost burned a house down. I was 5 and I found a pack of matches my parents smoked. And somehow I was playing with the matches and lit the couch on fire, right? And I was trying to put it out with a fork. I'm like 5 years old, right? And my parents came home and this whole couch is on fire. They They tried to put it out the couch, couldn't put it out, took it out of the house, let it burn outside, right? So literally at 5, I almost burned down the house. And you have the same thing where one of the kids burns the house down, right? So that's very close connection. As well, I've lived in the countryside as well as in the suburbs. And I lived in the big city when I'm older, so I kind of relate to all 3 of those elements: the big city, suburbs, and farm country. And as well as I moved recently from kind of the big city life of San Francisco, and I moved out to Ohio in a really kind of a suburb, but really slow paced. And from modern condo, which is 1980s, pretty new, all the way to this historic house, 1911, right? So it's kind of all these kind of creepy elements to my own house. It has like these doors where the door handles are really low because people are shorter, but it feels really unnatural in a way. They feel like they're about this far off because they're literally like, you reach down, you're like, "Arr." Every time you're like, in the night, you're like, it's here. No, it's down here. I have like weird things, like I have a coal chute, which obviously no one's used coal here for like maybe 20, 30 years. There was probably at one point they burned fire for heat, and then they switched to coal, and now they switched to central heat and central air. And you have this old electrical wire going through the house. I had my cat actually get into the inside of the house. So the cat came back like Pet Semetary in a way, like disappeared for a day and then came back and like, ah. So after the movie, I wasn't looking forward to going back to this historical house with the creepy, creaky doors and scary basement. I was like, ooh, this is creepy as hell. This is exactly like the movie. And my basement is a little bit lower than you'd want to build, so it's just kind of unnatural build there. But that was just how they built it back then. People really used the basement only probably for tornadoes and storage. And yeah, so it had that really nice twist, as well as with the woods. I didn't relate to it, but my wife, she didn't see the movie, but I totally relate to her fear. So she grew up in a really big city in Madrid, so she never knew the countryside. For her, was always kind of a little bit strange and weird, so she's always been fearful of the woods. I kind of related to this, I remember once we were in Ireland backpacking, and she's like, oh, let's go for a walk in the woods, and it was daylight, right? Like, it was like 3 in the afternoon. I was like, no, I gotta take a nap, I'm tired, we've been biking all day, right? So I wake up at 6, and it's starting to get dark, dusk. I'm like, okay, let's go out for a walk. She's like, are you crazy? There's murderers and killers out there. I was like, really? So from the daytime to nighttime, there's killers, and then in daytime, oh, it's safe for a nice walk, like Red Riding Hood or something. So I kind of related to this in the Pet Semetary, this unnatural, large, 50-acre, who has 50 acres? It's just some crazy amount of land. But you'd have all kind of wildlife there. Yeah, it's almost like the land owns you versus you owning the land, because you've so much of the land. It's only maybe 5% of the land is developed, and the rest is this Pet Semetary, and then this really weird land behind here that's no one's really using. It's like, why is this all attached to the property? So I had this really nice symbolism. Overall, I think the film is pretty good, pretty tightly woven. It's not too unexpected where it goes, but it's a horror film, kind of like there's something terrible going to happen to the family. That's why you go see it. It had some really good scares, I think, in this. Nothing too over the top, but it had a really nice slow build, which is what you really want in a horror film. You want to have this slow build, and then the third act's where all the action kind of takes place, and you have a little bit of kind of like unease in the second act. First act is pretty neutral, and then second act, you're like, oh, there's something a little stray, and then third act's like, oh my god, we gotta get out of here or something, fight or flight. So I think it was really well balanced formula-wise, similar to how Shining is well balanced. I'd say Shining's probably better shot than this film, but Kubrick's Kubrick, this is pretty good. I think this film would have been better if that first scene had been chopped out. That was just really stupid, sloppy filmmaking. Otherwise, I think these guys did a really good job. I just don't like the foreshadowing they had in the beginning. I just thought it was cheap way of doing it versus just using other symbols to get there, right? Like show a little fire, some firecrackers blow off someone's hand or something, to kind of relate that there's a fire later in the film or something like that, or something's astray with this town that would have been just a little more better put together. And overall, I liked the film a lot. Definitely gave me a good scare. I don't know if you'll relate to it as much as I did. It depends if you've grown up in the farm and creepy houses and moving around a lot and having PTSD, trauma from your childhood kind of thing. But yeah, I think a lot of people could watch this and it'll be very relatable. So I recommend it. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.